Imagine living in a world where a single accusation could destroy your life. Where punishment wasn't just about justice. It was about fear. In ancient Rome, prisons weren't places of reform. They were places of waiting. Waiting for judgment. Waiting for suffering. Or waiting for death. Because Rome didn't just punish criminals. It made examples out of them. Publicly. Brutally. And sometimes, permanently. But the real truth. The worst part wasn't always the punishment itself. It was what happened before it. When people think of prisons, they imagine cells, guards, routines. Ancient Rome was different. Prisons weren't designed for long-term living. They were holding spaces. Dark. Temporary. Unforgiving. One of the most infamous was the Mamertine Prison, a place carved beneath the city itself. From the outside, it looked insignificant. But below ground, it was something else entirely. Prisoners were lowered into underground chambers through openings in the ceiling. No propeduos. No easy escape. Just stone walls closing in from every side. Light barely reached inside. Air was heavy. Damp. The ground was cold, and often filthy. There were no beds. No comfort. No sense of time. And that was intentional. Because Rome didn't believe in keeping prisoners comfortable. It believed in breaking them before their punishment even began. Most people didn't stay there long. Not because they were released, but because something worse was waiting. Execution. Enslavement. Public punishment. The prison was just the first step. A place where fear settled in. Where uncertainty grew. Where a person realized they were no longer in control. Food was minimal. Water limited. And guards. They weren't there to help. They were there to ensure no one left. Because once you entered a Roman prison, you weren't expected to come out the same. Or sometimes, at all. In ancient Rome, punishment wasn't hidden behind walls. It was displayed. Because justice in Rome wasn't just about correcting behavior. It was about sending a message. To everyone. When a prisoner left a place like the Mamertine Prison, it usually meant one thing. Their fate had been decided. And that fate would be seen. Public executions were common. Not carried out quietly, but in front of crowds. Citizens gathered. Watched. Reacted. Because these events weren't just punishments. They were spectacles. A warning. A reminder of what happened to those who broke Roman law, or challenged Roman authority. Some were forced into arenas. Places like the Colosseum, where punishment could become entertainment. Prisoners, slaves, or enemies of the state were made to fight. Sometimes against each other. Sometimes against trained warriors. Sometimes against something far worse. And survival. It was never guaranteed. Even beyond the arenas, punishments were designed to be seen. Whippings. Public humiliation. Forced labor in chains. Everything done in open view. Because fear worked best when it was visible. When people could see the consequences with their own eyes. Rome understood something powerful. Control isn't just enforced through laws. It's enforced through fear. And by making punishment public, they ensured that fear spread far beyond the individual. It reached the crowd, the city, the empire itself. Because in Rome, one person's suffering was meant to control thousands. Roman punishment wasn't random. It was calculated. Every method had a purpose, to cause pain, yes, but also to demonstrate power. One of the most feared punishments was crucifixion. It wasn't just execution. It was a process. A slow one. Prisoners were forced to carry wooden beams through public streets, watched by crowds who understood exactly what was coming. By the time they reached the execution site, they were already weakened, physically and mentally. And then, it began. Crucifixion was designed to last. Hours. Sometimes days. Not hidden away, but placed along roads, where anyone passing could see. A warning without words. Another punishment was damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to beasts. Inside arenas like the Colosseum, Prisoners were sent into the sand to face animals they had no chance against. It wasn't just about death. It was about spectacle. The crowd watched, reacted, remembered. For others, punishment meant forced labor, mines, construction, endless physical work under brutal conditions. Many didn't survive long, and those who did, they carried the marks of it. Rome didn't aim for quick endings. It aimed for impact, pain that lasted, images that stayed in people's minds. Because punishment wasn't just about the individual. It was about everyone watching. Every method, every display, sent the same message. This is what happens when you lose Rome's protection. Or worse, when you stand against it. But in ancient Rome, breaking the body wasn't enough. Control went deeper than that. It reached into the mind. Because fear, once planted, could last far longer than pain. Inside places like the Mamertine Prison, prisoners weren't just confined. They were isolated, cut off from the outside world. From time, from certainty. Days blurred together. Light barely changed. Sound echoed in strange ways. It became difficult to know how long you had been there, or how much longer remained. And that uncertainty? It was part of the punishment. Because not knowing your fate can be more terrifying than knowing it. Some prisoners waited days. Others, weeks. All with the same question repeating in their minds. When will it happen? Rome understood something powerful. Anticipation can break a person before anything physical ever begins. Public humiliation added another layer. Prisoners could be paraded through the streets, displayed before crowds who mocked, shouted, or simply watched in silence. Stripped of dignity. Reduced to an example. Because once dignity is taken, resistance becomes harder. Hope becomes weaker. Even the act of waiting became psychological torture. Listening to footsteps outside. Hearing other prisoners taken away, never to return. Imagining what might come next. Every sound mattered. Every moment stretched. And slowly, the mind began to change. Because in Rome, punishment didn't begin at execution. It began the moment freedom was taken. And long before the final sentence was carried out. Many were already broken, and in the end, Roman punishment wasn't just about crime. It was about control. Everything, from the darkness of the Mamertine prison to the blood-stained sands of the Colosseum, served a single purpose. To remind people who held power. Rome didn't rely only on laws. It relied on visibility. On making punishment something people could see, hear, remember. Because fear spreads faster when it has an image. A story. A warning attached to it. And that's exactly what Rome created. A system where consequences weren't just severe. They were unforgettable. But here's the deeper truth. Not everyone was treated the same. Status mattered. A Roman citizen might face a different fate than a slave or a foreigner. Some were granted quicker deaths. Others endured far worse. Justice, in Rome, wasn't equal. It was selective. And that made it even more powerful. Because unpredictability adds another layer of fear. No one could be completely certain of their outcome. And that uncertainty kept people in line. For the empire, it worked. Order was maintained. Rebellion was discouraged. But the cost was human. Measured in suffering, in silence, in lives turned into warnings. Today, we look back at these systems as harsh, even shocking. But they reveal something important.